Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Full Tank Motorcycle Podcast. Today, coming up, we've got the CFMoto concept as this week's Bike of the Week, an attempt from KTM to monitor how offensively loud your bike is, and also, Tim, a new use for the Yamaha Ténéré 700. Anyway, how are things, mate?
Not too bad. Yeah, it's been quite a nice week because I'm always quite excited this time of year because, as you well know, the Isle of Man TT is on, and it is an exciting time. I know not everyone's a massive fan because it's re-recorded, or it's recorded rather, and then obviously posted after the fact, so it's not like watching live sports or anything like that. But I still think it's exciting in the way that they sort of edit it, and obviously they have to do that because there is a risk, and you don't really want to broadcast that sort of stuff. You've got to be sensitive to it. But so far, I haven't sort of caught up on all of it. I don't know how much you're across. I haven't seen anything so far, so I'll keep my fingers crossed for that one. But what I have been impressed by on day one, and spoilers, I apologise for anyone who hasn't watched it, but by the time this gets out, you probably have. It's been a record-breaking year, because you remember Michael Dunlop? I know you remember him, because we saw him at the the London Motorcycle Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a distance, and I was fanboying, and you didn't know who he was. So he, if you're across it, was looking to get the record for most wins around the Isle of Man. And he's been chasing that for a long while, as have a lot of other people. And this year, he has finally managed to meet the record on day one, I believe, of his Uncle Joey. So he's on 26 now, which I think is big news and it's worth shouting about. And even if you're not into the TT, it's a hell of a story, so go and check out some more stuff around that, definitely. You won't be disappointed.
You're holding off watching the final day's racing, though, are you? Because you said ITV are a day behind.
Yeah, so I say spoilers for everyone else watching as well. I'm trying to sort of keep that off myself. This is day one, so he's met the record. Basically, there was a chance of him breaking it last year, but obviously didn't get the chance. But you know, you're always going to come back. So he was always going to get that record this year because he's just on an absolute flyer. So he's managed to actually get there, which genuinely is monumental when you look at like the amount of risk involved to it, and the kind of lifespan of anyone in sports, in racing. You know, you can't do it forever. And John McGuinness is one of these kind of exceptions to the rule. What he's done is so impressive, and rightly so. It obviously meant a lot to him, and he was super emotional because he lost his uncle, his dad, his brother, I believe, as well. But yeah, you know, it's in his blood, it's in his family, and when you're dealing with that kind of risk, and you know how risky it is, to then pick yourself up and then still go and do it is incredible. I'll never understand the kind of strength that would take. But either way, you know, the exciting news, the happy news is that he's broken that, and that for the rest of this week, I mean, he's going to get another one. He must get another one. So he's going to exceed that and be the most successful racer on the Isle of Man, which is huge.
Well, like you say, I don't follow the sporting side of motorcycling that closely. So you are having to school me a little bit. But of course, being around the bike industry, you know, you get involved and know who's who and see people talking at certain events and that sort of thing. So I'm all too familiar, and it's super impressive. And while you haven't seen any of the final day, that's probably the only bit I did read about.
Oh.
And so weirdly, I sort of know more than you about that last bit there.
Ooh.
And what I will say is it probably will be a good watch.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's been a good one
levels.
so far. You want a bit of drama and you want competition. You don't just want someone to sort of like breed it. So the whole point of him and Peter Hickman, who actually you nearly had the chance to go around the track with, right, on one of the BMW days. So he might even be your favourite because he's the one that you've had sort of possibly more contact with. But obviously, you know yourself how exciting, exhilarating the Isle of Man TT course can be. Because both of us have been on there and weren't far off a lap record. So
exactly, mate. I was on a Honda NT1100.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Which is more impressive. I mean, to get the time, the lap times that you were posting, that's way more impressive. But yeah, so there's lots of things to watch. It's genuinely a good watch if you're at all passively interested in bikes. You should give it a watch. But one of the other things that's caught my eye. Two things, actually. One, you can actually watch a flying lap, which I know you you said you've seen as well, which is Davey Todd going around. But when you see it actually from their perspective, you understand what you and I were going through when we were riding around there. And the other thing I've seen is the anniversary Kawasaki, which looks phenomenal. I know you're a big fan as well.
Yes, and the only other thing that I have seen as well, actually, while I was away, which you mentioned you have watched, is that point of view video from inside Davey Todd's visor on one of the laps, and it is phenomenal. Yeah. Like, it just looks, if anything conveys a sense of speed, it's that video.
It's insane. It's difficult because action cameras don't necessarily translate the speed. Sometimes they look faster, sometimes they look slower based on kind of wide angles and things like that. I think that one...
Stabilization, I think, as well.
Yeah. That one, it's really hard to tell because I've never done 200 miles an hour between houses. But it looks like a pretty fair representation of what they actually see in their helmets. The difference being, I guess, they're not fixated on, a brick wall or whatever. They're just looking down tunnel vision of the road. But yeah, I'd say that is such an incredible kind of example of what it would be like to do there. Because you're in the helmet, you can see his brow. He doesn't even look that stressed. It's insane going round. But it's really impressive.
Yeah, it's quite something to watch. And yeah, I think the stabilization thing is what kind of blew my mind, because it's probably quite a simple, small camera to be able to fit it in there. Yeah. And so it probably doesn't have great image stabilization, but that gives you a real sense of, this is not a flat, super smooth. I mean, the road surfaces are great there, but it's not a super flat, smooth racetrack. Like, you are literally bouncing around.
Yeah.
And you're kind of thinking, well, how are you even picking your line or picking where you're going to turn when you're just being thrown around all over the place?
It's incredible. I was showing it to a friend and they were like, oh, wow, I didn't expect it to be that bumpy. And I was like, they said, is it not like smooth tarmac? And I was like, yeah, it is. If you go around at 60, it's buttery.
It's great.
It's the smoothest road you've ever been on.
Than anything.
But if you do 200 miles an hour, a small bump becomes massive. The other thing I know would impress you, or that you'd like to see as well, probably the same as me, is the anniversary edition of the Kawasaki as well. So that's the other thing I spotted was, I believe it's James Hillier. Let me check my facts there. Bournemouth Kawasaki who are returning, but basically it's the colour schemes that we love so much from going to, again, Motorcycle Live, London Motorcycle Show, etc. And we've seen these Kawasaki's rolled out in their retro colour schemes, and it does stand out, I have to say, from the pack going round the Isle of Man.
Oh, I can see what you mean, actually. Definitely. I've just seen a picture of it, and stands out from the pack might be an understatement. That really is quite punchy, and especially with the green rims, green on the fairing, green on the front there, green on his thighs, on the bottom of the forearms as well, and then, like you say, that sort of blue and white for the rest of it as a nod to the retro sort of paint scheme. Yeah, that's quite popping, isn't it? In fact, mate, I've actually recently got the Readly app, who are supporting the podcast this week, and it's the perfect place to keep up with everything that's happening over the race season, but also in the wider world of motorcycling, which is, of course, all the stuff we talk about on this podcast. Now, Readly is an app that I've got on my phone. You can also get it on your tablet, and basically gives you access to so many different bike magazines and publications, and it is quite hard to get your head around, actually, how many different things there are on there. So you've got MCN, you've got Bike, you've got Ride Magazine, you've got Motorcycle Sport and Leisure. And then, of course, for the times that I'm reading about something that isn't motorcycle related, which I do occasionally do from time to time, there's stuff like What Car, Autocar, Top Gear, all of the newspapers, tech, travel, and all that good stuff as well. Now, you actually only need to have one account for up to 5 family members to get access, so I share it with my family to make the most of the subscription. And there's loads of different categories on there, so it's really easy to find what you're interested in, and there should be something for everybody. Now, there's currently a free 2-month trial available at the moment, which you can easily cancel once you've signed up. So personally, I'd say it's really worth a look, and there's a link in the description of this podcast episode, so if you do want to see for yourself, then check it out. There's absolutely loads of good stuff to read on there. The other thing, Tim, that's super impressive about Readly as well is that you can actually access the entire back catalogue of any of those publications that I mentioned. And so if you do miss like a review or a feature on one of your favourite bikes or something you're thinking about buying, you can go back and read it and you haven't missed it because it's not on the magazine racks anymore. In fact, you can also download all your favourites onto your phone, read them offline when you're travelling. So it really is super useful and full of features. And like I say, if you follow the link in the description below of this video, you'll get access to that 2-month free trial of Readly, and like I say, you can cancel at any time. Honestly, super useful, nifty little app, and so yeah, wholeheartedly recommended. But that brings us quite nicely onto our first news story for today, and that's that Triumph have launched 12 new colorways across a bunch of their biggest bikes, and they've really gone down the super pop-in bold route, almost to the point where it can compete with that Kawasaki. The idea is that they are trying to meet the growing demand from customers for striking contemporary colour schemes, and so perhaps this is a further move away from the fairly muted, let's say, paint jobs that we've seen for the past 5 or 10 years, which people moan about. They say it's because no one buys the more popping ones, but maybe that's changing at the moment as tastes change and the sort of 90s, 80s, 90s kind of colourful paint schemes seem to be becoming a little bit more fashionable. So what I thought we'd do is rattle through the 12 of them and have a look at each picture, and then we'll maybe rate them. I think we'll go A, B, or C. What do you reckon?
Yeah, fine. Go A, B, C.
The first one, well, the first 3 are from their sort of adventure lineup. They're all Tigers. And so number 1 is the Tiger 660 Sport, which is, you know, very much a road-going bike, but still part of the Tiger family. This one comes in Baja Orange and Phantom Black. Now, Baja Orange goes way back for Triumph, doesn't it? In fact,
yes.
Sorry, I always forget, but that's your street triple was this colour.
Pretty much, yeah. I think, is that a gloss or a metallic finish? Because mine was obviously a matte finish. But yeah, that's pretty much the colour of my Triumph. When we're talking retro, I mean, it makes me feel kind of old, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, true. And I think there was a podcast episode in the early days of the podcast where I said that orange was the terrible colour. And then you told me about your street triple.
You laboured the point. But you really laid it on there. Yeah.
Did I?
Yeah, maybe feel awful.
Sorry about that, mate. But actually, you know, egg on my face, well, a nice orangey egg yolk on my face, because I think actually some of these orange Triumphs, Baja Orange is something that they've had for a while and been using it again more recently on some of the bikes like the Gold Lines and I think the Speed Twin 1200 had an option for this as well. And so I think, you know, I have to concede finally that it does look pretty good on some of these bikes. Yeah. I think it was an anti-KTM rant, which, to be fair, you know, they could do with branching out a bit, whereas Triumph have got this as part of a full spectrum of bright colours. Anyway, looking at this one, mate, what do you reckon?
I like it. I mean, you know I like it because I owned one. It wasn't necessarily my choice, but sort of grew to love it. But yes, I do like that one. If I was scoring it out of A, B, C, I'm going to say A, actually. I love that kind of really bold statement from Triumph, and it is tapping into their kind of heritage a little bit as well.
I think I'd agree. It gets an A, and that is me fully eating my anti-orange words, because previously this bike came in, I think, white, blue or red, and I think this looks better than any of those, and they were totally fine, but that does have a nice pop to it and suits the style of the bike. Number 2 is the Tiger 850 Sport, and I think this is another really famous Triumph colour from the sort of 90s, so I think you could get a speed triple in this, a street triple, and also one of the original, maybe the original Tiger 900. You could get this roulette green as well. So this one is roulette green and jet black. I don't know, mate. What do you reckon of this one?
I mean, I'm sticking that as like an A+. I actually prefer that to the orange, but that's because it's been kind of out of commission for a long while. And the other thing, which is really specific to me, but actually when we were growing up, my brother and I had a pair of BMXs that were exactly that orange and that green. And we also, because we were really cool, swapped the forks so that I had his orange forks on my green bike and vice versa. So yeah, it has a soft spot in my heart.
So what you're saying is you and your brother need to buy the Baja Orange Tiger 660,
Exactly
the Tiger 850 Sport, and then just swap
And
some
my
of
dad needs to
some of
swap
the
the forks
bodywork.
over. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
That's the sort of thing you do for your kids, though.
Yeah.
When they're like, Dad, can you swap the forks over? Why? I think I'll probably go high for that. Maybe not quite A plus. I don't know. It's probably not one that I'd actually buy, but just for bringing that color back, and hopefully it will come back into their roster as well. Yeah, I'll probably go A. Number 3, Tiger 850 Sport, also available in corrosive red with graphite. Mate, this is a bit of a B for me. This is a really common finish for the Tiger 900s. I think there's been a variant of this on the Tiger 850 Sport. It's totally fine. It's probably going to sell well because it's kind of an inoffensive red. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's got a particular wow factor.
No, that's kind of... Is that not the colour that we actually borrowed one, or very, very similar? But yeah, it's 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 one of those ones that probably would sell better, to be honest, because people don't want to take that kind of risk as much as they might say they do. But yeah, it's not particularly exciting, so B.
The previous gen of this bike, or the previous finish, was just the other way around. I think it was a silver tank with red side panels or something like that. So yeah, you may feel like you've already seen it, but it's just a variation of. New, though, on the Scrambler 900, we've got Kingfisher Blue with a couple of black stripes on it. And I think that looks quite nice.
Yeah, I really do like that one, actually. That it's eye-catching, but it's subtle enough that you can kind of make that work with stuff. It doesn't kind of clash with things. Sounds really kind of prissy. Like that I'm worried that it's going to clash with my jacket or something, but honestly no, that is a nice colour. That for me is definitely an A, because it's a little bit more tasteful arguably than kind of a fluorescent orange or green, as much as I like them. So probably would sell better. I can see a lot of people going for that option.
Yeah, I like that one as well, definitely. Suits the retro style, but not too much, not too crazy, but still has a pop of colour. Ticks a lot of boxes for me. We're into the Bonnies, actually, I should have said. Speedmaster, Snowdonia white and cranberry red. I like the way the stripe on the tank follows the line of the bike. Pretty nicely done. But as a colour combo, it is bright, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's something particularly wildly different to what's been available so far.
No, it's not risky. It's not risky. I wouldn't penalise them necessarily for that, but as far as the one you kind of go back to, or that go wow, it doesn't necessarily have the wow factor, although it's a very classy colour, so again, it probably sells well, and it probably is the one that would get more money spent on it, but yeah, subtle. It's subtle.
It's got to be a B for me.
Yeah.
T100, aluminium silver and Baja orange. Quite nice.
Yeah, very similar though, like similar in terms of its tastefulness. And sort of split colour, split tank. I don't know whether I'd buy that for myself, but again, I'm going to say B, because all of these, this bracket, if you like, are tasteful, classy, but not necessarily risky.
Same for the T120, crystal white and cranberry red.
Yeah.
Again, got to go B there, mate. And then the Bobber, matte graphite and matte Baja orange. That's the one you were talking about for your street triple. There it is. And I think that might be an A for me.
Oh, that's
great.
Fully an A for me, yeah. I love because the fact that you've gone for sort of blacked out everything else. So the engine's black, the wheels are black, and then you've got just a splash of colour. It's quite similar to the Scrambler 1200 that they did with that orange as well, but the matte. I'd like to see that in the flesh, because I wonder what the sort of contrast between metallic and matte, how that kind of works, but it looks nice.
Also, they've got the Speed Twin 900 apparently in matte phantom black and matte crystal white, but I don't see a picture in the press kit. And so we can't really rank that one, but black and white, I'm not going to say that it's going to come out particularly different to that B that we've given some of the other modern classics.
No.
But on to the Roadster lineup, and the Street Triple 765R is now available in matte Baja orange. That's basically the modern equivalent of what you had.
Basically, yeah, especially considering it's matte as well. I think it's very good. It is a bold, but then it's a bold bike, isn't it? If you go for that kind of street fighter bike, you kind of want it to be a bit loud and shouty, and that is about as loud and shouty as you could possibly get.
I also think the R model for this year, just gone, got some of the slightly more chilled finishes, whereas the RS was a bit more colourful, perhaps. And so it's actually nice that that base model has got something that looks a bit more sporty as an option. So I definitely like that one a lot. I might go A there. There's not been any C's yet.
No.
Nothing bad.
Imagine there was. You're like, that's cack. That's awful. No. So far.
Yeah, the RS is now available in Phantom Black. Yeah. And I think it's got a pop of that, what they call Triumph Racing Yellow now. So the graphics and logos are in Triumph Racing Yellow. I'm going to go, I mean, it doesn't really fit in with the press release of being bold new colour schemes, does it?
It's the graphic, isn't it? So it's not really the colour. But then, could you describe some of the Bonnevilles as bold new colour as well? It's subtle, isn't it? So
yeah, it still looks cool. Not as cool as when they did one with bronze wheels, like 2 years back. That was really good.
Now, if they went with if they matched the wheels to that RS logo, that could be quite exciting actually. But I'm still going to put that at a B, definitely B.
And then number 12, Speed Triple 1200 RS in Cosmic Yellow, which is what the Street Triple RS was available in last year.
There's a certain kind of yellow that's more kind of orangey yellow, like a warmer yellow.
Yeah.
And that's where that sits, and it's got kind of waspy bee vibes to it. And considering that it's got also a waspy face, you can't argue that colour suits that style of bike. And it is bold, but not so bold that it's not going to sell. I think that's a pretty good option. That's close to my favourite. It's probably an A for me.
Great. I don't know. I think I maybe prefer the slightly more neon-looking yellows on sporty bikes like this. So this is probably one of the few where we slightly disagree, and I'd go for a B.
Weirdly, that's the same kind of yellow, actually. Yeah, go for a bumblebee. Yeah, I was trying to manufacture a joke regarding that. That's the same yellow actually that my dad has a Street Triple in the same yellow, and I have to say I was fairly uncut. So again, I'm going to eat humble pie, same as you with the orange. I'm going to sort of eat my words and say actually I really like it on that bike, even though on his I kind of took the piss out of him for it. But yeah,
well, it's all a question of context, isn't it? Yeah. This sort of thing. Anyway, moving swiftly on to our second news story today. This one popped up in my feed and kind of caught my eye because they say that Humberside Police, this is from MCN, have launched a new force-wide operation designed to target criminals who use motorbikes to commit offences. So it's called Operation Yokohama, which started last month in May, I believe. And what they've done is given their riders, their police, roads policing team, advanced off-road training to help them chase riders deliberately going off-road to run from the law. And they've kitted them out with the perfect bike for the job, I would argue. And that's the Yamaha Ténéré 700. I wonder if they took them to the Adventure Centre in Wales to train them.
I mean, as far as training goes, lads, we're going to do some training. Oh, God, you're thinking sort of admin. Maybe you're going to have to do a freaking spreadsheet or something.
Stay out of the office for some
training.
Go
to Wales. We're going to ride some Yamaha Ténérés. Awesome.
Be pretty perfect, wouldn't it? Although I don't think it'd necessarily prepare you for the exact sort of riding that you'd be expecting to do if you were chasing someone who was trying to make a swift getaway, unless they stole a sheep and then took off through a forest.
There's a lot in Wales.
And maybe actually more appropriate off-road training is sort of like how to jump over a bin or go up and down curbs or go down a tight alleyway and wiggle the handlebars through and that sort of thing. But it does look pretty sweet, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, it's... I mean, any kind of police mocked up bike is pretty cool anyway, because it just looks a bit more utility.
Yes, definitely. Got the flashing lights on the front. Looks pretty good. And also apparently they equip them with stingers so that they can get ahead, chuck it across the road, pop the tyres of the Crims and bring them to a halt is what I imagine happens there. But I think that's the sort of thing I'd probably screw up and just get the wrong road or something and they'd ride round it or something like that. But anyway, it kind of had me thinking whether this could be the ultimate police bike. Certainly if you were going, mate, off-road, then it's probably got to be right up there with the best.
Yeah,
but
I wonder if they've watched the Yamaha press materials of people riding that thing up a cliff and they're like, yeah, same, that me, I'll do that.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, you don't immediately become Paul Tarres just from buying the bike. as I've found out from borrowing one. But it had me thinking, if it were your choice, you had to choose a police bike, bearing in mind the criteria are probably this. Ability to carry equipment, ability to ride it all day, every day, for like multiple days a week, for years on end, ability to ride in all weather, but it has to be quite nimble, and it has to be quick. Maybe not the off-road stuff, but if you're thinking normal police bike, is there anything that comes to mind? What would be the one bike you'd be happy on every single day, carting stuff about, chasing people around?
Ducati V4. Panigale. Stick a top box on the back with that thing, and you are sweet.
You know what? Actually, having listed those criteria that I just mentioned, and given that you wouldn't be paying for your own fuel, that would be a big factor here.
Yeah.
Actually, a Multistrada V4.
Oh, do you know what?
Serve it
Yeah. All right. I'll take that. That was my
right,
suggestion. Yeah, that's where I was going with it. That's genuinely probably the best choice. That's a really good shout. Like you say, you're not paying for the fuel. But also, bear in mind, if you're police, you've got the advanced rider training, which also allows you to ride above the speed limit. I forget what the sort of threshold is, but there's a certain sort of bracket that you're allowed to ride this much faster than the listed speed. And, I mean, you want a bike that can happily do that. And if you're going to go for a Ducati V4, then yes, it will. I mean, like, as we know from the Ducati day of trying to follow their lead rider, and you're like, these are like domestic roads though, yeah? So yeah, good bike.
Pretty rapid, comfy, can carry stuff. I think the GT version as well, which is more road and touring focused, has all the cases and stuff, but still got a ridiculous engine in it. And like I say, free fuel, so you don't have to even be particularly... That's the massive downside of that bike, is it drinks quickly, especially compared to like a Tiger 1200 or a GS. But if it's not for you to worry about, then you can just purely enjoy it, get the blues and twos on and pin the throttle and have a good time. I also got a little list here of motorcycles from around the world that are most commonly used or maybe occasionally used as police motorcycles. So let me rattle through this. Australia, it's the R1200 RT. Belgium is the Yamaha FGR 1300. Japan have got a whole menu here, including right down from Super Cubs up to Gold Wings. But let's say the Gold Wing is the gold standard there, probably. The Philippines get to choose from the Kawasaki Ninja 650R, the Kawasaki Versys 650, and something called a Russie SSX. Versys 650, though, probably pretty good.
Yeah.
A couple of bikes listed from the US. You've obviously got stuff like the Harley Davidson Electra Glide, that classic, probably very typical police silhouette. But also, apparently, the Las Vegas Marshal Service has the Zero ZF 5.7.
Interesting.
Which is a little bit of like, I think that's the FX ZF 5.7, which is kind of like... the off-road dirt bike version, so maybe they use that for similar stuff that the UK police are being trained for with the Ténéré 700. And then the last step in the UK, we've got the RT, of course. If you've ridden in the UK, you'll have seen many R1200 RT. And a shout out for the VFR 1200 as well, which I always think is actually quite a nice looking bike, but you do see a few of those knocking about. I'm sure there are many others as well. But given that nice little menu there, where would you most like him to be a police officer, given the bikes that would be at your disposal, and given that none of them are the perfect tool for the job, which is, as we just agreed wholeheartedly, the Multistrada V4?
Clearly. To be honest, probably the UK. I mean, like, you can't argue with an R1200 RT being a good choice for a copper, and BMW in general. Yeah, it's a really good choice. I would struggle to find one better. So
you're not tempted by the sort of general idea of you being sat by the side of the road astride an electric glide? I'm thinking open face helmet.
I was
big
tempted.
Mustache,
looking at the photo as well.
Aviators.
Right? Yeah, I mean, you've seen me with a mustache. If you haven't, I'll show you a photo. Amazing.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Really suits my face. So yeah, I think for me. No, I'm still going to go with sort of the UK, but I looking at the Electroglide, at that monster of a bike, there's something really cool about that, but I don't know whether they're kind of respected or kind of looked down on. Maybe our kind of listeners can tell us, because we've definitely got a few in the States. They can tell us how they're viewed, whether people respect their authority or whether they kind of see them as a bit dweeby.
I don't know. I've seen some footage of them riding those big bikes, and it is impressive.
To be fair, yeah, the slalom stuff that they do, yeah, that is quite impressive. So no, there's definitely some appeal to that, and there is something quite cool about, you know, being in, say, California with one of them.
Totally.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'd love to hear from other people as well around the world in the comments as to what bikes are most commonly used in your respective countries, and maybe there are some that we've missed. Definitely want to hear as well the more unusual bikes. But that moves us swiftly on to story number 3 today, and that is a patent from KTM where they've decided that it's a good idea, Tim, to have on-bike sound monitors to measure basically the amount of sound that your bike's putting out. Now, we've got to keep in mind as well that like sound restrictions are getting stricter and stricter, and especially in countries, I believe, like Austria, which is, of course, where KTM is based. So maybe it's more of a pressing concern to them and more front of mind. So this has led to products like Jekyll and Hyde with the exhaust system with a valve in it where you can press a button on the handlebars and quieten it down for certain scenarios, let's say. Maybe you're being tested. But also this idea here that with an 80 decibel limit, they would have sensors dotted around the bike which would help to keep you below it. And I believe from reading this article on Cycle World that the justification for it goes along these lines, that if you have a speedometer to monitor your speed in order to comply with the law, then why wouldn't you have a sound meter with a similar needle, let's say, to help you make sure that you're complying with the law in that regard, especially if you come across the audio equivalent, let's say, of a speed camera. And there's even, mate, some very simple illustrations in the article of a speedo for noise.
I'm glad they put that on there. I mean, I wouldn't, without seeing a circle with a line on it, I really would have struggled to understand what they're getting at.
I don't know what you think of this one, mate. We've seen some pretty interesting patterns over the last few months of doing this show. But this is probably one of the more surprising ones. I don't know. Would you buy a bike with something like this on it?
It wouldn't put me off, put it that way. But how much attention I would pay to it is... I'm not even going to say it's questionable. I know how much attention I pay to that. 0 until I was passing one of those sound enforcing cameras. But the problem with that is that, you know, if you want to... the safest possible way of you riding is watching the frickin' road where you're actually going. Not glancing down at the speedo constantly because you're worried about setting off a camera, if you're in like a 20-mile-an-hour zone around here, or glancing down at your audio decibel meter because you're worried about getting a fine because your bike's too loud, right? It's one of the things that absolutely infuriates me about the kind of restrictions that they keep bringing in year on year. So that's how I feel about it. How about you?
I get what you're saying, although it was interesting to hear you say I'd pay no attention at all until I came to a speed camera or like a sound testing, you know, camera or whatever it would be. Because it obviously would be super useful in that particular moment. But what I think is interesting is it puts the onus on the rider and not the manufacturer, which initially I'm against. You know, it's probably, I feel like it's their responsibility to make a bike that complies with the law all the time. But then, really thinking about it, the speedometer comparison or parallel that they've made is probably a good one, because you could argue they make bikes that can do, you know, 150 miles an hour and beyond, but they're not saying you should do that. And so you've got a needle in a circle to tell you when you go past the speed camera specifically, but also ideally all the time, whether you're going too quick or not. And the sound is just possibly another part of that, I suppose. You could argue if it's really loud in the upper rev range, maybe that's just for track use, and that actually they expect you to ride it more gently on the road in the same way that they expect you to do that with regards to the power. And so it's then on you as the rider to keep the revs low by short shifting or whatever to comply with the law on the road. Oh, I don't know how I feel about that, mate. Whose responsibility is that?
Well, exactly. I mean, but similar with the sort of Jekyll and Hyde exhaust, right, is that they're giving you a way to fudge the test, you know, if anything, right? They're finding a loophole that you can exploit if you want a loud exhaust still. So that's kind of one of their focuses with it. And it's a similar kind of method. And I understand the logic behind it, but I can't deny that it is triggering to me, mainly because it's the same reasons I get triggered by the kind of, like I say, 20-mile-an-hour zones or stuff like that I don't necessarily agree with in their entirety, at least in certain specific circumstances. But either way, it's a very long debate and kind of irritating, but it just feels like penalising people unnecessarily and also distracting them from trying to just ride. And London's distracting enough anyway. I don't need any more distractions.
I think it's going to be a controversial one. But yeah, let us know what you think in the comments below, anyone who's listening. We'd love to know your take on it. Speaking of which, let's move on to comment of the week. The previous episode was actually our little navigation of the Bike Shed custom show in London. It feels like ages ago now, actually, doesn't it? But it was a brilliant show.
Yeah, it was. It lived up to expectations. It's been a while since I've been there, so it was nice to see that it's still at a really good standard.
So we've pulled out a few reactions from that particular video with some of the bikes that we covered. So Charlie Coots says, great little video, fellas, in reference to the slabby bit of Wabi Slabby, which was one of the bikes we looked at. The first Gixxer 750s from Suzuki became known as slab size due to the fairing and overall design. So that's a little bit of insight, mate. I think we were getting a bit lost at that particular part of the day.
It's one of those things where you're slightly out of your depth, but you're kind of like, I know it, but I don't know it like enough to be confident that I can take a punt on this. But yeah, good. Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
User DB7NY6CS5P said the Ducati at the end is the most amazing one. And I think there were a few people actually that commented something along the same lines, which was that the Jim Alon's build with all of the metalwork and all of his own trellis frame and fork was the best bike of the show, and I think for a lot of people it has to be up there. And in fact, do I remember correctly, that was your pick?
I think so. I think it was one of those things that I kind of failed to commit to one, but it was definitely in my top 5 for sure. Yeah.
And then Craig John Boylan says the Renard BMW, which was one of the bikes I think I mentioned as maybe my pick, even though it was very unusual looking. He says it reminds me of Delahaye, Talbot and Bugatti cars. Are you familiar with Delahaye?
I'm not, but I have just looked it up, and
me either.
It's pretty much on the point. That is kind of the car I was thinking of. Sort of claim his. Yeah, that's obviously the one. It was just It was on the tip of my tongue. But no, it's that sort of era of car. But yeah, definitely good spot, good find. Better knowledge than me, clearly. But yes, it's got that kind of look to it. Very classy.
That era with the sort of wheel covers that's peeled back into a point. Yeah, I think definitely it does fit the bill. If you haven't seen that episode, definitely go check it out. It was really fun to shoot, brilliant bikes, and so yeah, just go on the main channel and have a look at our most recent videos. In fact, the red Ducati with all the custom framework is in the thumbnail, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. Anyway, let's round off with Bike of the Week. And I really like this one, mate. I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at this, but basically I don't know if it's a concept or perhaps a new model, but just for Asia. I think they were talking about just for Asian markets. But it's a 500cc CFMoto, and it's just further evidence in my mind that CFMoto are moving on to bigger and better things quite rapidly at the moment. It's called the 500 SR Voom. Like I say, a little 500cc 4-cylinder. And so I'd imagine it'd be quite revvy and probably feel something like the Kawasaki ZX4R to ride, which I reviewed, a couple months back now. And it was a lot of fun. It was sort of like weird to ride a small capacity inline 4 for me because it's not something I grew up with. But to be able to rev the nuts off an inline 4 and not be immediately sanctioned by the police was actually really fun, and the sound of it and everything was phenomenal. This one, though, has got a bit of a retro styling package as well, which I think...
Yeah, that is... Honestly, whoever is designing these bikes for CFMoto, take a bow. Their designs are impressive, and they keep getting better as well. It's the speed at which they improve that really impresses me. Because if you sort of look at their earlier ones, and on the day that I went out and we rode, they brought pretty much their whole fleet. And I think there was a 650. It was based on the Kawasaki for the day, and it wasn't particularly exciting. It's not the one anyone kind of rushed for to get the keys. But if you take the looks of that one and then track it all the way up to their 800 MT, and more relevant kind of bikes, or more recent, designs, like the development is really quick to a point where you see their bikes and you go, actually, that's really nice. Like you stop and stare at it kind of thing when you're walking through the motorcycle shows. And that's one of them. And if they brought this one out, it's stunning for a concept. It's beautiful. It's got kind of VFR 400 vibes. So that dual headlight on the front, right? Definitely. Tiny little bike, small revvy bike as well. So I think there's some sort of clear influence there, but actually possibly nicer looking. Not as authentically retro or historic, obviously, but for a modern take on it, really nice.
I think it looks super cool. I totally agree. And I think what's interesting about them as well is that they sort of have a design style as well, which is immediately recognizable now as CFMoto. It goes sort of along with like the 450 MT adventure bike that I really liked from EICMA last year. And I think it's mainly to do with their paint jobs and color choices and, you know, the blocks of color and things like that. But yeah, definitely their visual offering is getting stronger and stronger. I think maybe if you've been a little bit unkind with this one, mate, you might say that we've seen some of these design features vaguely before. Like that tail section is a bit MV Augusta, isn't it?
Do you know what? That's the other thing it put me in mind of as well, because of the dual headlights. Because obviously that's one of their kind of design cues as well. Yeah, there is a little bit of that. But actually, as far as kind of like taking off someone's design, this doesn't feel like a rip-off. It's what you kind of want. You want to bridge that gap between it's influenced by, but we're not doing a fake version of it, if you like. And I think this actually meets that really well.
Tail lights though, as well, a little bit Moto Guzzi V100 and V85 TT.
Yeah.
Little underseat exhaust at either side, a bit street triple maybe.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and all of those things are correct.
Like you say, it's fine to take influence and make something that is ultimately, quite different. The winglets look a bit daft for me. Doesn't really need them. But what's really interesting about those twin daytime running lights as well at the front, the round ones that give it that retro sports bike look, is if you go halfway down this article, there's actually a picture of some smoke pouring out of them. And that's because they're actually the air intake ducts as well.
That's cool.
So it should, it should get a fairly decent dose of oxygen through those two big holes right on the front. Don't know if it'll slow it down a bit. But a fantastic looking bike. Hopefully we do get something like that over here in the UK as well. Obviously with them being partnered with KTM and stuff like that. I'd like to see that. Maybe we will at some point.
Do you know what the engine is on that as well? Sorry to cut in, but I'm shopping around, mate. I want to know the prices as well. But do you know what the platform it's based on is?
It's a 500, like I say, inline 4, 500 cc's. It's going to feel like that revvy, smallish capacity inline 4. And I believe it's shared with a non-Voom. You know, this is called the 500 SR Voom. I think they've also previewed a 500 SR, which is a slightly more modern version of this. Yes, they have. They showed it in blue as like a camo thing. That was towards the back end of last year. So it looks like they'll do a modern version as well as this more, retro version as well. But I don't believe this engine has been seen before, and I don't think it's going to be... I'd imagine a small capacity inline 4 is not going to get ported into like a, adventure bike or something like that. It's really fit for one purpose, and that's revving the balls off it.
Yeah, I can see the appeal in that one, definitely. It's nice to give sort of at least a different option if you want, but if I was picking, I would definitely be going for the retro looks and that dual headlight.
Totally. It's kind of like the MT-09 versus the XSR 900 or something like that. The way that Yamaha are really good at offering you that very modern version of a bike and then the more old school looking version. And I think if you do go super modern, then maybe you need that slightly more traditional one as well to give people options. Anyway, as always, we'd love to know what you think of it, so do let us know down in the comments below and whether you think it's a great looking bike and a good direction, or is it just nostalgia overkill and it's holding us back. A huge thanks for listening today, as always. Please do also just generally leave your comments for us to discuss next time, and we'll see you then.